With me today is Shane Gardner. He is the Director of Safety and Security at Evergreen Public Schools here in our region. Shane has been a leader in our region, and he brings years of experience and knowledge to the table. I've had the pleasure of working with Shane for the last few years, and we'll get to hear a little bit more, learn a little bit more about Shane and his experience a bit later. But Shane, for now, it's great to have you with us today.
Thank you. I am here. Thank you.
Excellent. If you remember three things from today, we want you to remember this. The key to making your drills effective and trauma informed is that you need to first plan, then practice or conduct your drill, and then evaluate how it all went. We'll get into that in a moment, but planning, practicing, and evaluating are all critical to making your safe school plan or your EOP more than just a notebook on a shelf, or maybe these days it's a document in the cloud. Today, we'll be talking about the requirements, including what not to do. I'll also be sharing some best practices that are recommended from the field. We'll talk about the steps for making your drills trauma informed. And then I'll hand it over to Shane, and he'll talk about the real world application and what it actually looks like in the school setting. So why do we practice lockdown drills? Well, in our state, they are required. The RCW states that lockdown drills are used to isolate students and staff from threats of violence, such as suspicious trespassers or armed intruders. But what is the actual intent? What's the purpose behind requiring the lockdown drill? Well, history has shown us that door locks create a physical barrier between a perpetrator and their intended targets. So, as active shooter events typically end very quickly, averaging approximately 5 minutes from start to finish, door locks serve as a time barrier, as attackers do not have the time to breach the locked door before law enforcement arrives on scene. And there are many examples of locked doors saving lives. Incidents such as Sandy Hook, Virginia Tech, even Columbine, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, Appalachia, and even the shooting that happened earlier this year at the Catholic school in Minneapolis. But what's the difference between an active shooter drill and a lockdown drill? This discussion has come up recently in our region, and let's be clear, the RCW specifically states that schools may not include live simulated active shooter scenarios. Live simulations can cause distress in students and staff, and some studies suggest that this can lead to things like increased anxiety and depression. There's no real sufficient evidence or proof of the effectiveness of active shooter drills. These drills lack national guidelines. They're typically not developmentally appropriate and can be particularly harmful to vulnerable students. In fact, Shane and I were just talking about, I watched an HBO documentary yesterday, Thoughts and Prayers, and it was heartbreaking to hear students talk about some of their experiences. So instead of live simulations or active shooter drills, experts recommend focusing on trauma-informed lockdown drills, and that's what we're focused on today. Now, drills are a mitigation and response strategy. It's intended to save as many lives as possible. However, let's not forget prevention strategies, utilizing behavioral health supports and resources, and implementing evidence-based threat assessment programs can prevent these situations from happening in the first place. So, conducting exercises are critical to having an effective safe school plan or EOP. Exercises include things like trainings, tabletops, and drills, all the way up to full-scale exercises. In fact, your safe school plans or your EOPs are required to identify when and how you'll provide training, conduct tabletops, and conduct your drills in partnership with emergency responders. Incidentally, last week, I was reviewing an after-action report for a school shooting at Oxford High School in Michigan back in 2021, and it was really interesting to see how much focus they put on the EOP itself and whether schools actually carried out the actions that were written in their EOP, including the training and the drills. And I've seen this before in other after-action reviews. So the Safe School Plan is an important requirement, and exercising the plan is also required and just as important. So training's what you do so students and staff know what to do. And that could be sharing one of the SRP videos we have linked to our training playlist. It could be providing students and staff information about practices, resources and information, or even holding a workshop. There are option-based trainings out there that some schools are using. We just held a webinar a couple weeks ago on Avoid, Deny, and Defend. That is a training. It did not include a live simulation. The focus of that training was on what adults do in response to an active threat. If you missed that webinar, you can find it on our training playlist. But trainings give people information on what they need to do. Tabletops, on the other hand, are an opportunity for everyone to talk through a scenario. And scenarios are great for allowing people to practice that critical decision-making skills based on different situations. Teachers can talk about what they might do in their classrooms. The safety team can talk through the different roles that they might be playing on an incident command team. And teachers can even have conversations with students ahead of drills, talking through what to expect. So tabletops can be a great tool. They're part of an exercise package, but they can also be a tool to help you determine, do you need to make updates to the plan? Were there things that came up through that discussion that point to a need for more training or changes to the plan? They can also help you prepare for conducting your drill. Now, drills practice a specific set of actions. And that's the procedures as well as the responsibilities of everyone involved. Drills are critical to help us build that muscle memory that's so important during moments of real incidents when your stress response system is kicked up to really high level stress. So, training, tabletops, and drills are a broader part of exercising your safe school plan. Now, your EOP should guide you on how you'll conduct your drill. Remember, you're exercising what's written in your safe school plan. So you need to have that plan, but you also need to plan for your drill and have a plan for how you're going to conduct your drill. You plan, then you can plan your training, your tabletop, your drill. You actually then practice it. So the training can be followed up with a tabletop, giving people an opportunity to discuss more and apply what they learned in the training. And then the tabletop can be followed with the drill. It doesn't necessarily have to happen in that order, but that could be a logical part of your exercise plan. So you plan it out, you do it, and then equally important, you need to evaluate how it all went, whether that's through a debrief, a hot wash, an after action review. This gives everyone an opportunity to address any concerns that came up. Again, update the plan if needed, and decide if you need to do some additional training or take other actions. And this is true for any drill, not just lockdown, for fire, evacuation, earthquake, everything. All of those things that you're already doing, having a plan, practicing, and then evaluating it. How do we make sure, though, that all of your drills are trauma-informed, and particularly lockdown drills? Well, these are steps that you can do to help protect the psychological safety of both students and staff. So before you conduct a drill, people need to know what to expect. And it's really helpful to work with a team from your building. Be proactive. Seek input from multiple stakeholders, having teachers' perspectives, counselors, facilities. All of them play an important role and can help inform how you carry out your drill. Know your students. What supports or accommodations might they need? Is there a way for them to opt out? Teachers, specialists, and even parents can be particularly helpful with this. You also need to communicate the plan. Does everyone have a copy of the procedures? Do they know what their role is? Are parents aware of the procedures? Does everyone know when drills are scheduled and who will be involved? Leading age-appropriate, trauma-informed conversations with students prior to conducting the drill can go a long ways. And then, of course, you absolutely have to announce the drill. This is a drill. Everyone should know it's a drill and not a real event. The adult's role is to model calm behavior and the behavior that you're expecting from your students. So all teachers and all staff in the building should take the drill seriously. And then when you do your evaluation or your debriefing, you can address any concerns that came up. Did something not go as planned? Was there a gap in communication? Do students and staff need more information, or do students and staff need access to more support? Then you can update it. And so you can see this becomes a continuous cycle of updating your safe school plan through the use of your exercises, your training, your tabletops, and your drills. Plan, practice, and evaluate. You plan what you're going to do, you do it, and then you evaluate how it all went. So, why is this so important? Well, many things can go wrong. If you're a fan of The Office, you might remember the episode where Dwight conducts a fire drill. We're going to watch the setup for this scene and determine whether this is trauma informed. You can probably guess. This is also a YouTube link, so bear with me if it plays a commercial. Okay, so was that trauma informed? Absolutely not. No. So many things went wrong in that situation. And if you haven't seen the episode, you saw that it takes a while for everyone to realize what's happening, but eventually the office erupts into complete chaos. People are panicking. I didn't show the entire scene, but people are trying to break windows open. At one point, there's a flying cat through the office. And so while this is a comedic example of what can go wrong, you may recall Stanley, one of the characters in the show, he actually collapses from a heart attack at the end of the scene. So, on a more serious note, if people don't know what to expect, if people don't know it's a practice drill, if you start bringing in simulations of fire or violence, you're setting yourself up for disaster. Live simulations can cause real trauma and have some real consequences. So you don't want to and you don't need to scare people into doing what you want them to do. You have to practice care and caution anytime you conduct a safety drill. So don't be Dwight. Don't do that. Do this. Work with a team to help plan. Seek input from multiple perspectives. Know your students and be proactive about their needs. Communicate ahead of time. Announce the drill. Model calm behavior and address any concerns that come up. Those are some recommended best practices. It is now my pleasure to introduce Shane, who's going to talk more about the real world settings and how to apply this at school. I got to know Shane a little bit as we were preparing this webinar and wanted to share. Shane started his career in the U.S. Army and National Guard, serving about 10 years, received a degree in speech communications. He's participated in leadership Clark County. And before starting his position at Evergreen in 2015, he served at the Clark County Sheriff's Office for 17 years. And among some of the roles he played, he worked as an undercover narcotics detective. He was also a school resource officer supervisor. So it's my pleasure to hand it over to Shane, who's going to pick it up from here. Thank you, Shane.
Oh, thank you, Karina. Yeah, that's about 7 years of growth of my hair there. Those were good times. All right, let's go to the next slide. It's all right. So, with that set up and the background, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about like philosophically how I've tried to implement this at my district. And the first thing, if anybody's prior service, they'll understand like one of the things in the Army we talked about with land navigation. Nobody's ever an expert in land navigation, even having successfully made it through Ranger School. There's no experts because as soon as you say that you're an expert, that's when you're reminded and humbled by how you're not an expert. So I will be the first to admit that I'm a practitioner of all the things that Karina has just talked about with these lockdown. And I love you guys standard response protocols, but by no means an expert. I'm here to learn as much as I am to share with you how we're implementing those things. So I'm happy to speak with anybody afterwards. We'll, of course, have questions, but like I'm going to share with you how we're trying to do things here at Evergreen and share with you the best practices from I love you guys as well. And that actually begins with this video that we're going to watch. So next slide.
So today we did our fall lockdown drill. We do 2 lockdown drills a year in our district. The intent of our drills is to educate our students and to teach them that muscle memory on what to do if there's a crisis within their facility.
We showed our students a video from the I Love You Guys Foundation, and then we announced for them that this would be a drill.
We have our law enforcement participate in our drills for multiple reasons. So one is that they understand the language and the terminology that we're using.
Common language between students, staff, first responders, and parents is important in any type of crisis. The standard response protocol provides that common language. It's based on 5 actions: hold, secure, lockdown, evacuate, and shelter. One or more of those actions can be used in any type of crisis.
Security alert. Security alert.
We are all currently moving to a place where we cannot be seen through the window.
Door, please.
The role of Thornton Police in this particular situation is they know where to obtain school keys from, and then they break into different teams and they start investigating classrooms and clearing classrooms to make sure that classrooms are all safe, and to give staff and students feedback on where they should be strategically located in those respective spaces.
Door, please. How we doing? Fantastic. You guys did a great job. This is a drill, okay? Go ahead and hang out here until we release everybody. Thank you for not opening the door, and thank you for being seated and being quiet. Thank you very much.
There's somebody knocking on the door saying, "Police, please open up." We are not going to get up and move. We're going to stay where we are because the police have keys to our doors and have the ability to get into the room. If it really is the police, they will open up the door themselves.
Security alert. Security alert.
But the beauty of the lockdown drill is what? It removes people from being targets quickly, but what does it do for the cop? It sanitizes the building.
So doing a lockdown drill is safe and important because it's better to know what you're doing than not at all. Because if it was an emergency, then it would be extremely important to know what you're doing.
I'm waiting to hear how he's doing down there.
We don't simulate acts of violence in our schools when we do our lockdown drills.
Open the door, I forgot my key. Door and police.
I'm not stressed or scared because I know it's a drill, but I know that it could be serious in case of an emergency, so I know to stay quiet and sit still and don't be on my phone.
Have you guys checked this?
Yeah.
Oh, you already did?
Attention students and staff, thank you for participating in our practice lockdown drill. You may now proceed to your student survey and make sure you stay in your second hour until the bell rings for passing period. Thank you.
And then we get together with the school administration team as well as the police officers who helped, and they provide feedback based on the zones that they helped us unlock and release the lockdown on. So the feedback could be anything from, hey, I have a key here that didn't work very well on this doorknob, and so that turns into a work order that we can immediately respond and get that corrected.
It's become more of a reality that this can happen, and so I think that my perspective personally has changed to I need to take it seriously and make sure that I am doing what I can to keep myself safe and my classmates safe.
We want to empower our students and educate our students so they know how to keep themselves safe in a crisis. That's what I hope at the end of the day.
Shane, if you're talking, you're still on mute.
Thank you. Can we go to the next slide? All right. So one of the things that I'll say up front is with Karina's introduction, you know that my past is military and law enforcement. So I will, I am not going to intentionally say something that will shock your conscience, but I may say something that shocks your conscience. And I'm happy to speak with you about it and apologize if I hurt somebody's feelings or trigger somebody with that. And just know that I wouldn't intentionally try to do that. I say that because shortly after coming here from law enforcement, when I first started working for Evergreen, we were talking about lockdown, and we had an opportunity to speak to all of our staff and I'm told it was the first time in a long time that we had all of our classified uh, staff all together, bus drivers, everybody all together. And we were talking to them about what to do during a lockdown so that they would know if they were parked out in front of a school and the school was in lockdown, what they were supposed to do and what the folks were that, the cooks, the people that were cooking food and the custodians and everybody got this training, not just the teachers and the students, but everybody was getting the training. And one of the people that worked in our IT department at the time had been a youth leader for me when I was in junior high. And she knew me as a kid, and now I was an adult. And she said, "Hey, Shane, great job on that presentation. I don't think I've ever heard somebody say capping kids in a school setting before, but somehow you got away with it." So, um, anyways, I was trying to explain that if somebody is shooting at kids in the school setting, that we're going to take every measure we can to stop that threat and end that threat from stop that killing. I didn't realize that I had said it in a way that was so um, plain talk. That being said, what is important is that I want to just talk about the lockdown for a moment. That as we as adults are confronting a subject that when we talk about lockdowns, oftentimes we all go to the active threat that Karina talked about, that the reason for a lockdown, the reason that we're practicing these lockdowns is because we are preparing for what we all have seen on newspapers and on TV across this nation, time and time and time again. What we know statistically, and unfortunately we have reams of data, is that more often than not, the suspect is a student or a former student, and they will do exactly what Karina had talked about, which is try to take as many lives as possible, as quickly as possible. And that's why we do these practices so that we can get as many people behind a locked and secured door as quickly as possible, with the idea being that that person who's set on getting a body count will be deprived of the ability to get in and to get access to those and then move on to look for others. Uh, and that creates time for our first responders, which we know will be coming from everywhere. So when we talk about building muscle memory, though, we use terminology in military and in law enforcement that we have to be careful to make sure that when we use in the education setting or to somebody that's come up through the education setting that makes sense, because even you heard the police officer talking in that video when he was talking to the student, he talked about sanitizing the building. It's a real interesting word to use, and it makes sense to me. What he's talking about is police are about to descend on a place looking for an active shooter. And the idea that all the kids that are victims or potential victims are locked and secured in classrooms. Meanwhile, the perpetrators are locked out of the classroom. That's what he's talking about. It sanitizes the building of all the innocents and leaves only the suspects roaming the hallways, so that when his law enforcement officers arrive to confront the threat, they're less likely to run into an innocent that is stuck in the hallway, because we've gone through these practices of locking down. Everybody knows to get into a classroom immediately and to lock and secure the door and to stay there, so that you don't have somebody that's just wandering the hallway during one of these lockdown situations, but uses terminology like sanitizing the building. So um, uh, all to say that as we work through our plans and as we plan through our plans, the importance of getting together in the calm and meeting with law enforcement and meeting with fire and meeting with AMR or whatever your ambulance company is ahead of time is to all get on the same language and get on the same and don't make assumptions that when you say words that you're using the same, because for the longest time before we had adopted the standard response protocol here in Clark County, law enforcement would tell us lockdown, and they would call and say, hey, we're doing a search warrant a couple blocks away. We need your buildings to lock down. And really, if they're doing a search warrant a couple blocks away, we don't need to lock down. We only need to lock down when the threat's in our building or directed at our building, because there's no learning that's going to occur during a lockdown. So we really need to go into secure. So we actually had to work with our law enforcement partners to educate them on the standard response protocol as well, to teach them our vernacular, that, hey, these are the words that we're using and the situations that we would use them in. So when we come together, we're actually all using the same language. When we talk about building muscle memory and when we talk about drills, and one of the early on slides, you saw the word practice underneath the word drill, which is a word I added. Karina, thank you so much for putting this slide deck together. She did the lion's share of all this preparation. And I looked over it and I go, oh, I want to put the word practice in here. So I put the word practice. And the reason I do that, also, one of my soapboxes is I know the RCWs and I know the WACs all refer to these requirements as drills, that we have to do these drills. But I implore you, as you go back to your buildings, to call them practices and to frame them as practices, because what happens in my argument for using the word practice is when we call them drills, if you think back to sports and if you've played sports, you've maybe done rebounding drills or you've done tackling drills or you've done any kind of drill, which You do the drill repetitively, and the purpose for doing that drill repetitively is to react without thinking. You want to be so good at rebounding that you instinctually go up and get the rebound without even thinking about, oh my gosh, I just did that. You just wanted to be able to do it. However, in these emergency situations, we have to be at a new level. We have to not only have the muscle memory to recognize the environment that we're in, but we also have to have that situational awareness. We have to be thinking at the same time. And that's why when we frame them as practices, not as drills, we can't react without thinking. We have to react with thinking the entire time. So I also would encourage you to create scenarios for every single one of the drills or practices that you have to do. Have a scenario for it. Now, here's the other thing. Coming from the outside world, looking into education, oftentimes uh, these drills are considered an interruption to education. Like, oh, we have to do a drill. I would reframe that as we get to do a drill, because these drills are teaching also. They're great teaching opportunities, whether it's a fire drill or an earthquake drill or these lockdown drills. When we look at our communities, not just the shootings that are happening in schools, the violence that's happening, parades where people are using vehicles. When we look at violence that's happening in the community, the only place that's really teaching our community how to respond to violence is in our schools. So in addition to teaching our students uh, how to read and how to write and math and all these other social things that we are helping them navigate, we're also helping them to understand that the world can be a place that has unexpected things happen. And when we keep our head on a swivel and when we plan for these things and when you go to the mall, say you have a mall in your town, when you go there with your family, you should have a plan ahead of time that if something goes down here at the mall, if there's a shooting in the food court, you shouldn't be meeting at the mall. Like Vancouver Mall has a Red Robin that's across the parking lot, still near the mall, but across the parking lot. Our plan was always if something goes down while we're at the mall, because we're not always staying together as a family unit, the kids might want to go this way and my wife and I might want to go that way. If something happens while we're at the mall, we're going to meet up at the Red Robin. That way, we're not in the hot zone looking for each other, exposing each other to danger. If something happened while we were at the mall, everybody gets to leave the area where the danger is happening to go meet up in another place. So these are skills that apply to real life. Also, we have opportunity to teach our kids by applying some of these filters. So we have our situational awareness of what's going on, what's happening around us. We have an opportunity to apply a scenario to it. And then we look at our environmental concerns as well. One other example, we had an elementary principal that came to me 2 years ago now, I think, and asked the question of what happens if we're in a lockdown and a fire drill goes off? What do we do? And I said, well, you stay where you're at. And he says, but we're supposed to evacuate when the fire drill goes off. I go, yeah, that's what fire code says you're supposed to do, but not when we're in a lockdown. I said, can you think of a scenario when you might be in a lockdown and the fire drill might go off? And he goes, well, I go, I've already thought of one. If you want to practice it, we can. And he's like, well, what's your scenario? I go, okay, say that we have a family and one half of the family is restrained from the other, and that restrained parent shows up in your office, and you know that that family is restrained. So you tell that member of the family, you're not supposed to be here. You know, you're not supposed to be here. And they said, I don't care. I'm not leaving until I get my kid. And you say, well, I'm just telling you right now, we've notified the police and the police are on their way. And you put the school in lockdown, and the person then goes over and pulls the fire alarm. because there's one in the school office. There is. So now the school's been put into lockdown because you've got this parent that's restrained that shouldn't be there that is, and then they go over and pull the fire alarm. So what do your students do? Your students are on lockdown and now fire alarm goes off. It's a very real scenario that could happen to any one of us. So again, in those situations when we're doing a practice, when we're doing a drill, the idea is not to cause any more trauma. And in our school here, we have had students in our school who have had shootings at their previous schools, who have been involved in shootings in Colorado and have moved away from Colorado and moved here. And those parents early on identified themselves to us and wanted to be resources to us and advise us and say, hey, this happened. So we were aware that their students were trauma impacted from those things, which helped our awareness for other kids to think about those things also. But when we talk about there's only one drill that we do that our fire marshal will not let us give warning to family and let them know that it's a practice, and that's our fire drill. Every other drill that we do, we can, we are allowed, and we are encouraged because the purpose of our practices is not to cause more trauma and cause people to freak out and wonder if this is the real thing. It's for training and for learning and for planning and to make sure that things go as planned and to evaluate them, as Karina talked about. Next slide, please. All right. So this is a typical classroom and a typical door swing. And then the diagonal that you see in the upper right-hand corner would be called the hard corner. And this is something that came out after it was really looked at after the shooting in Florida, the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting. That was I believe, the first school shooting where a student actually died behind a locked door. Up until that, everybody was able to say that no student had died behind a locked door. But in that shooting, Nicholas Cruz actually shot through the window and then inserted the rifle through the window and shot into the classroom. And then everything that isn't in that triangle was visible to him from the door. So in their after action review, they came up with this hard corner idea. And then there's actual legislation, and it's part of the law in Florida now for their safe schools that this area will be marked on the carpet in their classrooms. And then to make sure that like the teacher's desk isn't blocking this corner so that there is room for students to huddle in that corner if they need to in an emergency. But what is most important is that when we're talking about, you know, doing a lockdown again, there are other parts of the lockdown. So when we do a scenario, when we're talking, I would encourage you to talk to a couple teachers of yours, to find a couple teachers when you're, so every drill that we do isn't, and we don't have to do more than one lockdown. It's not like a fire drill where you have to do multiple every year, but you might have, this is a time for teachers to evaluate, like if, and again, you want to pick the idea is not to traumatize the teacher, but and what we've done is we've talked to some of well, I talk to the principals. I empower them and encourage them to do these things. They know their staff better than me. But basically the thought is to get a couple of your teachers that are, you know, more proactive, and you find a teacher that's willing to truly barricade their door. So for this drill, you guys are going to pile up all your desks against the door and then take pictures of it to show what it looks like. Because in most of our school lockdown situations, staff and students don't take the time to truly barricade their door. But if gunshots were actually ringing out, people would do those things. So in one of the when we do a drill, you might ask one of your teachers, like, would you actually have your students barricade it and take pictures of what that would look like? Or take notes on like what you would do different. So we've learned so far that furniture movers would sure be nice to have underneath some of the heavier equipment. Like I've got a filing cabinet next to the door. I tried to move it across the carpet. It wouldn't move. I need to get furniture movers so I can either push them under the uh, filing cabinet at the time I need them or keep it under my filing cabinet at all times so I can slide it over there and then kick it out underneath. It'd be a great doorstop or my desk. So those are some of the things that we've asked them to do. And then uh, when they're taking photos, also, like it's still a serious, not glamour shots and not trophy shots, but at the same time, we're also not causing trauma either. So phones should be off and away. And then one of the things to think about as we practice these drills, you could also, because what we've experienced during our actual lockdowns, unfortunately, we've had a shooting at one of our schools in 2023, and information is not readily available to everybody in a moment. It takes a while for it to come out. What we found is that a lot of students had their phones out and were texting their parents, and then that information is coming back to us a myriad of ways. And one of the after action review lessons that we learned was that it would have been beneficial for us to send out messaging because we were waiting for law enforcement to go room by room and clear and it was taking a long time, but we could have been using our PA system to send messaging to attention staff and students, please text your loved ones this message and put this out. And if we would have been like sending that every 5 or 10 minutes, both the parents that were assembled on site waiting for their kids would have heard that message going out every 5 or 10 minutes. And the kids that were actually texting their messages to their parents, it would have been undeniable that we were, in fact, messaging this no matter what message your kiddo sent you, because everybody heard that message go out probably 20 times. So that is something that if you don't practice that as part of your lockdown, like at this point in time, we would be putting a message out to everyone to do the following. One of the other things that we learned is that every practice that we had done ended at, like if we ever did a lockdown with law enforcement, sorry to jump around, if we did a lockdown practice with law enforcement where law enforcement was actually on the scene, then when law enforcement neutralized our threat, that is where the scenario indexed. And then it was like, okay, the threat is over. And then we'd work through what it was like to get the classrooms out. But for any of you that might be administrators, we never worked out the next part, which is recovery. Are we going to have school tomorrow? Like our school is now a crime scene. What does tomorrow look like? Is tomorrow a 2 hour late start? Is class canceled tomorrow? Are we ever going to have school in this building again? Like that part of the drill and that part of the discussion was like when our shooting happened, we asked for a police officer to be at the building the following day, and we were actually told that they didn't have a body for us. We appealed and actually got one, but initially the first response was, sorry, we don't have anybody available. And we did a 2 hour late start so we could address our staff in the first 2 hours before the students came. Still, it was the shooting happened on a Thursday. We didn't want to cancel school on Friday and not have the kids come back before the weekend. We did want to be able to have a touch point with the kids before the weekend because of this traumatic event that happened. But at the same time, then feedback we got from the staff was that the staff would have sure loved to have that whole day to themselves. So I don't know that there's a win when it happens on a Thursday and you only have one day there. But these are things for your team to discuss before it ever even happens, because what we realized is when we had been doing our practices, we hadn't practiced all the way to the end. We had only practiced right up to a certain point, and then had been doing, okay, index, and that was that. And we hadn't talked about what is this going to look like for the next piece? What does recovery look like from here on out? What does the counseling look like from here on out? What does it look like for the SMART team from here on out? So just to continue that, next slide, please. All right. Some of you might be like, but we do run, hide, fight, or we do avoid, defend, deny, defend, or we do Alice. Uh, the the thing is with lockdown, with all the standard response protocol doesn't say you can't do these things. The thing is that once you're locked down, it's best to stay secured where you're at because of what the police officer said about the building being sterilized. And because in many of these cases, there may be more than one shooter. You don't know where the shooter is. It might be that you receive information that you have a large building and you are locked down and there's nothing going on in your section right where you're at, but you don't know for a fact that there isn't somebody in the hallway waiting for you to unlock your door and try to make a run for it. So if you're safe where you're at, just stay where you're at, would be the advice that I would give. The idea behind the run, hide, fight is not necessarily like you're secured in a classroom. You may have students that are stuck in a bathroom. They could be in the restroom when something like this happens. The advice given is for the teacher as they secure the door to sweep any students that are in the hallway into their room when a lockdown happens. Then they could end up with students that they don't normally have in their room, just to get them locked down to be able to lock the door. So anyways, all right. The point is, no matter which of these you use, they can fit into the standard response protocol. But we're talking about the lockdown piece. And then the advice that we're giving is like when you're secure, when you're locked down in your room, our advice is to stay in your room. And then the next slide, because we're running short on time, I just want to say that in your buildings, if you can adopt something like a safety minute, if you can encourage your principals to take a minute out of a staff meeting to do a safety minute, then every single staff meeting they have, like one of the things that we've done here at Evergreen Public Schools, I've talked to them about the benefits of backing on arrival. That there are, I don't remember what the number is now because I haven't brushed up for it, but there are a number of students, a number of children every year in this country that are backed over because backing is dangerous. Cars are designed to go forward. We drive on average 12,000 miles forward every year and only a couple hundred in reverse. Our cars aren't designed to go in reverse. We have a lot of blind spots in reverse. So the idea of backing on arrival is the safest way to go. Also, if you're out shopping with your kids and you back into a spot, then when you need to put things in your trunk, you're not standing with cars driving past you when you're putting things in your trunk. You're standing either on the curb or standing in the middle of the parking area. Also, when you pull in, nose in a parking space and you have kids in the back seat, then when they open the door, it's an automatic barrier between you and them. If they wanted to run, they could run towards the rear of the car, which is towards the traffic. So there's just benefits to backing on arrival. Every year at the beginning of the year, I hit on this one thing, backing on arrival. And then I go around to our schools and I look at the number of cars that are backed into parking spots or they arrive early enough that they just pull through. And then when they go to leave, they just have to get in and drive out. One, it looks cool. It looks like there's a car show at every school. And two, it's safer. And I get to tell all of them that the first act that they do every day, parking the way that they do, is an act of safety. And it begins their arrival at school. They're doing an intentional act with safety in mind. So building a culture of safety, if they do a safety minute, it doesn't have to be all about lockdown. It could be about any safety thing, but it builds a culture. It provides an opportunity to talk about safety. It sends a signal that safety is important in this school, and makes it a priority and enables other people to bring up safety concerns. The next thing I would talk about is, can I help you? Everybody at a school should be empowered to say, can I help you, to anybody that's not wearing any kind of ID. So, and that can be tested. Principal can have maintenance or anybody else walk around without ID. Somebody should jack them up and say, excuse me, can I help you? I notice you're not wearing your name tag. It doesn't matter if it's the superintendent or whoever it might be. Everybody should have a name tag on to identify who they are, or the office is this way, let me escort you, or, radio call to somebody to say there's somebody walking around out here without a name tag. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Karina.
Yeah, thank you. So stop the prop. These are just a couple of other things that I've heard districts using. Camas School District uses a Stop the Prop campaign, and that's a way to remind teachers not to leave their doors propped open. There have been many examples where a prop door became a liability. So stop the prop. Lockdown lollipops is another example I've heard used. These are just tips or things that you can do, particularly for elementary age or younger age students, but hey, maybe high school too, where you hand out lollipops. It helps them actually be quiet when they're needing to practice locks, lights, out of sight, and being quiet. Would love to hear other thoughts and ideas from everyone. I know there are a lot out there. But to wrap us up for the day, just find my mouse. There we go. We're coming back to the key takeaways. Remember, have a plan. Be intentional and thoughtful about how you plan your lockdown drills or practices, any tabletops you do, training, etc. Then you practice it. You go and do it. You do your training. You do your tabletop. You do your drill. But don't forget, afterwards, evaluate how it all went. So that is our webinar on lockdown drills. I hope that you can walk away with some ideas and certainly keep in mind the best practices that we talked about, as well as gain some insights from Shane and the reality and the real world of actually conducting lockdown drills at your schools.